Oh, hello. It's so great to see you today. I've been in the mood to make some slow stitch snowflakes, and here's the very first one. As usual, I'm starting out without much of a plan. Well, I have a bit of a plan. I found this scrap of black linen, and I thought it would be a good way to use up some of the really pale, to me, washed out colors of embroidery floss that I always seem to accumulate. I usually buy my embroidery threads secondhand, and the packs often come with lots of colors that I don't really use. So I've settled on this kind of uninteresting off-white color to start with, and I'm doing something called a whipped running stitch. I started out by just making a straight row of running stitches, and then on my way back towards what's going to be the center of my snowflake, I wrapped my thread around those stitches without going through the cloth. My snowflake's going to have 6 spokes. I've pre-decided that, but I have not done any drawings on my cloth to indicate where they're going to go. I'm just going to make it up as I go along and see what happens. So the way that I decided to do this is, instead of making each of the spokes side by side, I'm making 3 spokes in basically a Y-shaped pattern. And as with all things that are symmetrical in a circle, like a mandala or a snowflake, all you have to do is make one decision and then repeat that all the way around the circle. So I'm doing the same thing or essentially the same thing that I did on that first spoke. I'm doing a running stitch out towards the edge, and then on the way back I'm wrapping my thread through those stitches, around and through those stitches, but not through the cloth, and that stitch is called whipped running stitch. And then when I finish those first 3 spokes, I'm going back in and creating another set of 3 spokes halfway in between the ones I've already created. And that way it creates something that's relatively even, not exactly, but pretty close. And that's good enough for me, because to me, slow stitching is all about being intuitive and not measuring and worrying about precision and detail. And as I'm working on this, you may have noticed this. I certainly did. That first spoke that I did ended up being longer than these other spokes, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I know that there'll be ways to deal with that as I go along. So I'm going to continue making the spokes as my foundation for the rest of the stitching that's going to come later. And at this point, I don't know what that's going to be, what it's going to look like. And yeah, I think it will emerge with time. I have not really set any parameters for this project. I'm hoping to do quite a few snowflakes and fill up this whole cloth, but I don't really know how many that will take. I don't know what they're going to look like. And I don't know what my time frame for finishing this is. I have some ideas, but you never know. Things could change as it goes along. I could change my mind. And now that I've got my 6 spokes, I've still got some of that thread left, but not very much. And I'm thinking about what I can do next. And remember, all I have to do is to make one decision. And I thought that I could probably do a straight stitch. I'm just calling this a straight stitch. It's not really running stitch, not really back stitch. It's just a straight stitch in between each of those spokes, quite close to the middle, because I don't have a lot of thread left, and I'm doing something. I heard this term that called yarn chicken. It's a term that's used in knitting for when you're not sure if you have enough yarn to finish your project. In this case, I don't know if I have enough thread to finish this row, so I'm playing thread chicken, and let's see how far I get. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to make it. Yep, I think that's about it. That's all I can get out of this thread. I don't think there's another stitch there. So I'm going to tie this off at the back, and I don't even know that there's enough thread there to secure it off at the back. I think I'm going to maybe have to leave this and hope it gets secured down by the other stitches as I keep going. So Now, because I have that one stitch there, I'm going to thread up the same color again and do some more stitching with that same color. I'm not tied to doing the whole piece in one color, but since I need to finish this little bit, I'll thread up some more thread. I was using 3 strands, so now I have the other 3 left, so I may as well use those up. So there you go. I've finished that little central element there, and now I'm going to decide what next. What should I do next? I've got quite a bit of thread here, so what did I decide that I was going to do? I decided to do some small chain stitches near that central point there, but I'm also going to take this opportunity, while I've got lots of thread here, to extend the length of some of those spokes there as I go around so that they match the longest spoke that I have, because it's easy to add length. It's not easy to take it away unless I cut off my threads. It's not that I never cut my threads out, but wherever possible, I look for other options rather than cutting out my threads. So there's one spoke lengthened, and now I'm going to go down and do another chain stitch in between those 2 spokes there. And then the next spoke, I don't need to make it any longer because it's the longest one, so I'll skip it and do the next chain stitch, and I'll just continue around and around doing the same thing. And I thought I'm going to leave pretty much everything in, not all of the content, but I'm doing this pretty much in real time. I've edited out all the bits where I fuss around and sort of go off and make myself some tea, wait for my camera to cool down when it's overheated. I've cut out all of that. But basically, this is in real time as I was stitching. I initially thought I might set a time limit for myself, but I realized that setting a time limit is really counter to the whole slow stitching idea, which is intuitive, without planning, without worrying about all of those rigors of modern life, of manufactured life. So time is one of those manufactured things. It's just me and my needle and the cloth and the thread here. And no, I'm not wearing a thimble. I was wearing a thimble for a bit today, and I ditched it pretty quickly. So it's just me, my fingers, my thread, and the cloth. That's all there is. And of course the camera. So it's not completely without manufactured objects, but as much as possible I want this to be, for me as well as hopefully for you, an intuitive and calm activity, and I don't want to be worrying about the time. So now I've got all the way around. I'm back at the beginning. I'm back at the last spoke there, and I made it without running out of thread. But now I have that question, what am I going to do with the thread that I have left now? I decided that there wasn't enough to worry about, and I've decided to switch colors, and I'm going to use this pale mauve color, and I'm doing fly stitches, but using those spokes that I created previously, and the stitches in those spokes as my anchor points for my fly stitch. So I'm coming up on the cloth, going behind the stitches but not through the cloth, and making a fly stitch there. And after I've made that decision on the first one, all I have to do is repeat that as I go around the circle. But I decided to get fancy there, because instead of going from one of those long spokes to the next one, I decided to add a little bit of embellishment to to the chain stitch in the middle, and I did 2 straight stitches on either side of the chain stitch. So that's a little bit of more of a complex pattern. I remember when my kids were young, when they were in school, they would learn about sequences and patterns, and there are simple patterns that you just do one thing and you repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And then you can have much more complex sequences. There could be 2 steps or 3 steps or 25 steps. And depending on your intellectual capabilities, you'll be able to hold more or less of those repeating steps in your head at one time. And to tell you the truth, I'm not very good at keeping multiple steps in my head all at one time. But I think this amount I can manage. Two sets of complexity I can manage. That's about my limit. But I could also have just done the fly stitches on the long spokes and then gone back around and done the little straight stitches around the chain stitch separately. It would have had the same effect in the end. Maybe I would have used up a little bit more thread, maybe not, don't know. Doesn't really matter. And I'm not worried about which direction, whether I'm starting at the top of the spoke or at the bottom of the spoke. I'm starting wherever I am. So when I'm near the bottom, I start at the bottom. When I'm near the top, I start at the top. Some people might like that to be more repeatable and regular. It's really up to you. There's no right or wrong way. It's just a personal preference. And that's the nice thing about slow stitching. You can dump all of those rules that we've learned through our lifetime of going to school and getting marked and having people correct what we're doing. And I was just having a conversation with my daughter today. She was telling me that when she was taking a language class at university, her pronunciation of the language, well, it was French. She was taking a beginner's French class after having taken 2 years of French immersion in high school. And she said that she could tell that the other students were not pronouncing the words properly. And she was oh, hello, there's a little cat who's come to join me and make noise. And she said that she was surprised that the teacher didn't correct the other students. And I said, well, that's actually a teaching strategy, because if you correct people, that diminishes their motivation and desire to keep going. But if you let them keep going, they'll eventually get better. Just by repetition and doing it. And I think it's the same with stitching. Is it important to have all your stitches the same length? No. If you stitch for a really long time, you'll start to develop a rhythm with your stitches, and they will just automatically become more regular and more precise. But you can learn a lot just by creating a volume of work, and that's something that we understand in the art world, that you need to practice. Practice is better than ripping things out and doing it over because there's some voice in your head telling you that what you've done is not good enough. What you can do right now is exactly where you need to be. You will get better if you keep doing it. However, if you feel like you're not good enough and you get discouraged, then you'll never get better. So this is how good I am at my advanced age, and it makes me happy to do this. It doesn't make me happy to try to make it more perfect. So I'm just going to keep doing what I like to do and not worry about the people who tell me I need to be better. There was a conversation on one of the groups that I belong to online where somebody asked the question, what is slow stitching? And I said it was like embroidery, but without all the need for precision and detail and all of those things. And somebody piped in and said that you should always be striving for neat stitches. And I totally disagree with that. And now, as you can see, I've changed colors. Now I've got a pale green color here, and I'm going in and I'm creating what is called a pistol stitch. Now, a pistol stitch is kind of like a combination of a straight stitch with a French knot at the end. So with a French knot, you usually go back into the cloth in the same place that you came up. But with this stitch, you go back into the cloth a little ways away, so it creates a line with a little knobbly bit on the end. And this is somewhere where it's very good to not be overly precise, because if you mess up on a French knot or a pistol stitch, you can't just take out the one stitch because there's a knot in it. You have to take them all out. And sometimes when I'm doing these stitches, they get a little bit scruffy and loopy, and yeah, I don't take them out. I just keep going. And I might do something to secure the loops down. That didn't happen this time, but if it does happen, I might do something to create a bigger, scruffier knot with all of them, or pull some of those threads through to the back off of the one scruffy one. Or basically just look for ways to problem solve and find ways to de-emphasize the bit that I'm not enjoying. And you can see here, I've just got this one snowflake here, but you can see how many stitches that I've already added here, and none of those individual stitches are important. What's important is how the overall snowflake looks. So you can imagine that once I've got many snowflakes on this page, once it's all covered with snowflakes in all different sizes and patterns, at that point even one snowflake is not going to be important. What's important is the overall connection of all of those stitches. Now I finished my fly stitches, and I'm going around because I've got enough thread. I kind of look at how much thread I have. Sometimes I wrap it around and see how far it'll go. And I decided that I have enough there to do some fly stitches all the way around, emanating from the chain stitches that I did earlier. And that's the nice thing about using these loop stitches. You can use previous stitches as your securing stitch for them. So I don't have to go through to the back off the cloth when I'm going through the through that chain stitch. I'm just going through the threads on the top surface off the cloth all the way around. And at any point when I feel like I've got enough stitches there, I can stop. And here's the thing, I'm quite the maximalist, so when I decided I was going to give myself a time limit to do this, I didn't take that into consideration, because the more I add, the more I like the snowflakes. So when I was at the 10-minute mark, I thought, I'm not ready to stop. When I was at the 15-minute mark, I thought, I'm not ready to stop yet. So I just kept going until I felt like I was finished. And I felt like that was a much better and much more slow stitch type way to decide when to stop rather than to listen to a timer. So now I still had some thread left on my needle, enough to do something small. So I decided to do these little straight stitches in the middle of my fly stitch. Now possibly I could have done something, made a decision earlier and created a triangle stitch or something like that if I had wanted to, but I didn't. I just decided to do those fly stitches, and then when those were done, I went ahead and put a little stitch in the middle, and there is my finished snowflake, the first one. And I learned some things, and I made some decisions about where I want this project to go. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye for now.